Hi everyone, and thank you so much for your incredible feedback on yesterday's video about Wargaming's tiered loot boxes. There are 1,700 comments and counting, and today I want to address the suggestion from the community that I don't make tank reviews. So firstly, I'm absolutely humbled that you think that I have the power to influence Wargaming's monetary decisions. The fact of the matter is that no one has gone harder on Wargaming since the inception of loot boxes. For example, I made an entire video about gambling in World of Tanks in 2018 where... So ladies and gents, I'd just like to finish this video by saying, do not be convinced by predatory tactics to gamble in a video game with real money to be able to get pixels in your garage. And since then, I've made tens of videos calling out Wargaming for their predatory practices. In February, I made a video which literally detailed the history of monetization inside World of Tanks and came to the conclusion that it's rampant, and I very much questioned whether you should be a tank collector inside the game. One thing that kind of baffled me in the comments is a lot of players are saying, well, QB, you don't seem to be talking about it very much. And I understand that probably you just don't keep up with all of my content. And also, just because I'm not making a video about the horrific monetization in World of Tanks every single week, although I'm sure a lot of people would enjoy that, it doesn't mean that I'm not delivering feedback to really high ups at Wargaming. The unfortunate fact of the matter is that when it comes to monetization, Wargaming don't really listen to their community contributors at all. In yesterday's video, I broke down exactly what would be the cost depending on your situation to be able to have an even chance of getting all of the vehicles. And the spoilers, it was $700 to $1,000 with regular luck. The outcome of that is that I made a very strong opinion to suggest that you should quit being a tank collector inside World of Tanks. I personally still don't think the game is done quite yet. We do have a gigantic September update coming up. However, one thing's for sure, and that is that I'm just completely ashamed of Wargaming's rampant predatory monetization, and I'm going to add to it to say that I truly hope that legislation is employed by governments to stop these predatory loot boxes inside video games. Also, for tiered loot boxes, I will not produce a YouTube video where I open said tiered loot boxes. However, what I will do is open loot boxes off stream because there's something very important that the community needs to know, and that is, what is the chance of you getting a certain loot box of different grades from a loot box? So accordingly, in the next few days, I will publish a community note on YouTube, which doesn't get any ad revenue, which will detail what percentages I got of opening boxes to get different grades of boxes, because that significantly changes the likelihood of you being able to get especially the 2 new tier 10s quickly. I also want to highlight to the community that I will not be paying for the boxes. I will instead donate the money for the boxes that are given for testing purposes to Cancer Research UK and Special Effect. A lot of you who tune in to my annual charity marathons will know that last year I gave £5,000, which is probably the equivalent of about $6,000 or $7,000 US, and I will continue to do so this year, in part to offset the amount of money that I would have to spend to still be, like you, a paying customer of Wargaming. It's just instead of Wargaming getting my money, charity does instead. Now look, the reason why I started making YouTube videos in early 2012 was to help you to be able to make informed decisions. Tank reviews are important because they enable you to decide whether the content is worth the price tag. And obviously, in this case, the content is not worth the price tag at all. However, those tank reviews are also useful for future viewers to see whether a vehicle might be worth getting when it's available separately outside of loot boxes. And also, the tank review is of critical importance to help all of you out there who aren't going to be suckers and pay hundreds, if not thousands of dollars to be able to get your hands on this content, to see how the vehicles perform, to know how to counter them. And so accordingly, I don't think that less information and less communication is really going to help the problem. The outcomes are Wargaming aren't going to get any of the money from me. I won't open loot boxes on YouTube to kind of like show their flashy gimmicky mechanics. However, I will publish the important information that Wargaming aren't publishing of how likely it is you're going to get different boxes from boxes, of which I won't benefit financially from that information, but I will be publishing tank reviews on all of the vehicles to make sure that I'm enabling the community to know what these vehicles are all about, because that's one of the keys to being successful inside World of Tanks. Knowing the capabilities of these tanks that you're going to play against to know how to counter them. And I will make sure that in these tank reviews that I am highlighting that. So to conclude, I understand the community is rightly furious about these new tiered loot boxes. I am too. But I hope you understand that I will continue to review these vehicles, as I think the only thing is really going to make a difference is if you, the player, are as informed as possible to make your own financial decisions and decide whether this game is either worth paying for or even worth playing. So the first vehicle I will be reviewing will be the Chieftain Mk, and honestly, this has been a tank that I've wanted in the game for 10 years. Here's a little bit of a history about the Chieftain Mk. It was actually available on the Chinese server a decade ago for, I think it was an extortionate price of several $100s. I think it might still be available for whale prices on the Chinese server. And funnily enough, it's actually been in the game for over a decade on the European and NA client. It's just never been available. And it pains me that a tank that I've wanted for a decade is going to come behind such a disgusting predatory price tag. And in today's tank review, I'm going to let you know whether this vehicle was worth the wait. So I'm going to compare the Chieftain to the Can Opener, Super Conqueror, and the T10 Immediately we notice that the Chieftain's 120mm has whopping damage per minute. 2,909 damage per minute makes all of these vehicles pale in comparison, especially that nerfed Super Conqueror. The penetration also at 270 on the standard rounds, although it's APCR and not AP, is also great. However, this vehicle's premium penetration at 310 really falls back. So if you think this is the kind of tank which can just sit there and spam gold, you are not in the same league as a Super Conqueror, and the 340 heat pen on the T10 does things that the Chieftain can only dream about. However, the vehicle's HE rounds, while they have a horrendous shell velocity of 671, have phenomenal penetration at 140, which allows you to go through quite a few medium tanks, let alone light tanks, with that sheer amount of penetration. The shell velocity on this vehicle is also great, and it carries enough ammunition to be able to get the job done, as you can take a variety of rounds. Also, when we look at the gun handling of this vehicle, this tank is looking incredible. It has the best moving dispersion in this comparison, joint best with the Super Conqueror, the same turret traverse dispersion as the Super Conqueror, the best accuracy, although not by much compared to the Can Opener and the Super Conqueror, and 1.5 seconds aim time just is that little bit of extra. It also has 10 degrees of gun depression, so far with regards to firepower and gun handling, it's looking like the Chieftain is a god. However, when we look at the mobility of the vehicle, it's up and down really. Forwards great at 42, backwards great at 15. The weight of the vehicle is practically the same as the T10, but the power to weight it's significantly worse than the T10. In this vehicle, it does struggle to get up to its top speed limit, especially on medium and soft. It's actually a little bit slower than the T10 on soft because of the poor ground resistance that this vehicle has on medium terrain. However, undoubtedly, this is an agile, heavy tank with fantastic firepower that is significantly better than these other three vehicles. However, unfortunately, this is where the good news ends. And when we take a look at the Chieftain's armor layout, we see that it has one of the worst lower plates on any Tier 10 heavy. 76mm of armor. This thing has practically Tier 8 Centurion armor at Tier 10. And the news gets even worse when we look at the armor on the side. It's angled, which is great, which means that you can over-angle this as long as your opponents don't have 120mm guns, because it's only got 38mm of side armor. So any of you out there who see a Chieftain Mk, if you have a 120mm gun and larger, you can overmatch the whole of the side of this tank. And also, if the Chieftain decides to side scrape, it gets very awkward because you can even shoot this upper plate here, even with Tier 8 tanks, to be able to penetrate it. And so that's one of my biggest tips for fighting the Chieftain Mk, is make sure you just nail the side of this vehicle with your 120mm and you'll be able to dominate it. Apart from that, you can see that even with 238mm of penetration, you can actually go through through the forehead of the Chieftain, and it's very weak here as well, and it has a big crown on top of the tank, which is easy to hit. Even when you're using the 10 degrees of gun depression, it's still a vulnerability. Another thing to mention about this weak point is it's actually only 60 millimeters of armor, and so if you have good HE pen, like the Chieftain Mark 6 does, you can actually penetrate this thing with HE rounds. Big TDs at tier 10, like the T10 will be able to do 1,000 damage to the Chieftain if they're able to hit that weak point. One thing that also happens with this tank is it takes lots of artillery damage because the whole of the top is 25, and because of that horrendous side armor and awful belly armor of 17 millimeters, this truly is a glass cannon when it comes to artillery shells. Add to this the fact that it's got the joint lowest hit points in this scenario, and yeah, this thing, it's more of a medium tank with regards to its armor than a heavy tank. Add to this bad view range at 390, and all in all, the Chieftain it's more of a medium tank than a heavy tank, but of course, you don't get good camo. Crew skills wise on the Chieftain, I would recommend you take Brothers Repairs, Recon, Emergency, Coordination, and Practicality for your commander, Brothers Repairs, Snapshot, Deadeye, Designated Target, and Armor on your gunner. On your driver, Brothers Repairs, Smooth Ride, Off-Road Driving, Engineering, Controlled Impact will do you well. On your loader skills, I'd recommend Brothers Repairs, Adrenaline Rush for that DPM, Intuition so you can use the HE rounds, ammo tuning, and close quarters combat. And on the radio operator skills, situational awareness, side by side, and firefighting. For the equipment on this tank, I'm going to take two builds. One, I'm going to use vents, a gun rammer, and vert stabs. And the vert stabs, even though this vehicle has good gun handling, is to enable the tank to avoid its weak point getting hit. And also, the whole point about this vehicle is the firepower, so you might as well boost it. For my second build on this tank, I'm going to drop the vert stabs and use a turbo for when I need to rush into positions. You could take an experimental turbo here, but this thing really does need the grunt in the engine, so maybe even a bounty or a bond turbo would be better on the Chieftain. For the field mods, I would recommend all-terrain suspension to help its ground resistances, improve the accuracy of the vehicle, improve the view range of the vehicle, take the firepower slot so you can boost the gun rammer, and then take reverse speed for your penultimate field mod. And then I'd recommend the gun handling for the final one, although when I think about it, considering how much this likes to sit in the open and take hits from artillery, you could actually go the other way and protect yourself if you find yourself getting furious at artillery. But you know what? That's quite enough jibber jabber. I've waited 10 years to be able to play this tank. Let's see what it's capable of. So firstly, we're going to roll out in the Chieftain in a full tier 10 matchup with an artillery. And we're playing on Serene Coast, so there's a lovely opportunity to go to the C1 area to be able to go hull down. This vehicle, it took me a while to actually figure out what to be doing with this tank. And the bottom line is, you should take every opportunity to always go to a hull down position. A bit like you're playing a can opener or a super conqueror. That's funny, that guy's got the sorry style on the DBV that Wargaming gave out. I wonder if they'll do something for the tiered loot boxes. I don't think so. I digress. It's just on my brain the whole time at the moment. What a absolute joke this whole scenario from Wargaming is. But let me focus up on what I was trying to say. And that is that the Chieftain, compared to the Super Conqueror and the Can Opener, they're all hull-down vehicles, but this one has no opportunity to side-scrape like a Super Conqueror or a Can Opener can. And so accordingly, this vehicle, it needs to literally go into a hull-down position every time. And sometimes you're going to be in a situation where, oh, I don't really want to be here, right? The Foch manages to hit me. I actually finish them off. I decide I can't stop the TVP from going after me, but I might be able to stop the Caro from going after me. The Caro ricochets. I realize I got a TVP behind me. I don't think the Caro has any more shells, but he actually does. Luckily, I managed to get my driver back in the game, and that's going to allow me to turn, to shoot the TVP, but I actually lose my gunner there as well. And this makes me think that I should probably change the final field mod that I'm using, so I actually protect my crew from injuries a little bit. But we're down to 51 hit points now. Yay. In the first 2 minutes of this game, as we got bum rushed by multiple autoloaders, 3 autoloaders at the same time. But luckily, with the firepower of this vehicle, we actually managed to shoot back against our opponents and deal with them. And unfortunately, with the dead gunner, the accuracy of this vehicle not looking great there. But let's go, dudes. Let's go. 5,000 combined, and I get a thumbs up from this T62A. I have to admit, mate, it probably would have been nicer if you'd just come with me, right, in that situation. But oh well. I'm going to switch out here. Managed to put 458 damage into the MX. come on, dude. What was that? Oh, man. So the T60UA sits at the back the whole time. To be fair, he probably got a few shots on. And then rolls in with his precious hit points while I've got none of them. And jumps off a cliff. And wow, yeah, look at this thing's gun. Even with a dead gunner, it still absolutely claps. And oh, here we go. Artillery's going to get me. Oh, thank goodness the artillery only does 9 damage to me, but stuns me, so it's going to be harder to fight back against the T124. Nevertheless, we put a shot right through, I believe, the side of their turret there. Are they pointing their turret at me? Nah, that's the back of the T124. Happy about that. And another one in. And look, even while stunned, man, this thing just prints. It really does absolutely print. And you have so much control over a ridgeline. I do love setting this thing up in a firepower build and getting on a ridgeline. It just feels great in this kind of a situation. And just like that, in just over 3 minutes, we pumped out 7,500 combined. And those 51 hit points, they went a long way there, baby. They did go a long way. But now we've got the awkward situation of trying to dig out tank destroyers at the end. And that artillery, I mean, he could. I would say that they could land pretty much anywhere near my vehicle and shut me down. But we did get away with only taking 9 damage from a T92. I don't even know how that's possible. Maybe my tracks absorbed most of the punishment there. Because this vehicle, as I highlighted, it has horrible protection against artillery. It's got like that 18 millimeters of belly armor, sub 40 millimeters of side armor, only like about 25 on top of this tank. It really does not take artillery shells very well at all. I'm just hoping now that we can get some funky shots through these tanker carriages, I guess, containers on this train. And I'm just hoping maybe we can get one through the lower plate there. We don't manage to quite catch it. And now it looks like I've drawn the wrath of the American autoloader. Looks like that DBV, was he pointing at me? Yeah, it looks like he was pointing at me, although it's quite far away. There's an FE405, so I'm actually going to switch out to an HE shell here. And you're going to see just how slow these HE shells are, even at this very short distance. Look at that, they're so slow. There's only 600 meters a second shell velocity on them, so don't try and use them at long range unless they're against stationary targets. But this is just perfect for me. My turret can work if they don't hit my weak point. Their turrets cannot work most of the time. I shouldn't have opened my mouth, really, should I? And it's just grinding in this kind of situation. And luckily, the DBV was silly and didn't fire HE, and it doesn't look like the T57 Heavy carries an HE round, and I don't carry HE rounds in my T57 Heavy. The tank's got hardly any ammunition, and I'm usually running out by the end of the game anyway. At least in a game which is probably longer than this one, the 5 minutes, right? But let's go, let's go. 9,000 combined in 5 minutes. An absolute cracking game for the Centurion here. The kind of result that you would always want to have in a tank which you've waited 10 years for. Next up, we're playing on Karelia, and I've elected to take a turbo instead of the vert stabs to be able to try and get forward into position. And I want to highlight that this vehicle, even with a turbo, it just doesn't really feel too fast, in all honesty. Now, of course, 3 IS-7s are enough to make every heavy tank slow, but it's really not a fast heavy. If you were thinking it was something that could be able to YOLO into position quickly, it just didn't for me. I ended up losing so many hit points every time I wanted to try and get into an early position that I didn't have enough hit points when I was there to be able to make effective trades. Excuse me, sorry. And that was one of the biggest issues for me with this vehicle, is it's the kind of tank that wants to get forwards and conquer, but it just doesn't really have the speed or the armor to be able to get forwards and conquer. And I consider myself lucky here that I didn't take an extra 700 damage and that I didn't lose more than half my hit points trying to get into position. And yeah, upslope, man, 12? This thing wants to be a medium tank, but it just doesn't have the engine power or the camo to be a medium tank. And so it kind of ends up being this like high risk, high reward kind of vehicle where, I mean, if you catch a bat chat, right? But now I've got the reverse speed, I might as well go towards him and try and bait him into missing my tracks there. And it actually pays off really well for me. And then I'm going to be loading an HE shell here to hope for a high roll to be able to shut him down. Unfortunately, it's actually a low roll. So the bat chat managed to escape on 40 hit points. And just hoping that they're going to mess up. And talk about mess up. The fact that they only put 2 out of 4 shots in there, that was a big mess up. But oh wow, look at this farm. And I can't think of a better tank to be in with regards to just farming this kind of a situation, right? Maybe like a 2-round autoloader. There we go. There's the mouse just going through my front plate like it was absolutely nothing, hitting right on the beak. And suddenly I don't have enough hit points to even be able to make use of this position. So we can see that the bat chat is now dead. And in retrospect, what I probably should do is actually swing round. If I were to swing back and go in a hold down position, I think it'd be better than just holding this position. But I'm also a little bit worried that I get spotted by the gorilla and the Ho-Ri. You can see me constantly looking over the left to see if those guys are going to be able to hit me, but also to see if I can be able to hit them. And also by going away for a little while, I'm hoping that it means the 780 won't be so inclined to shoot me. But yeah, I guess they are. Just as I disappeared, they must have seen me lurching around the corner, and that allows them to catch me. But man, we are pumping in this situation. But it's kind of like the dream, right? I've got the side of a load of heavy tanks. This should be the dream, right? So I'm going to do what I probably should have done about 30 seconds ago, which is to always make sure I'm hull down in this situation and to not expose just that really long and horrible side armor. And what I really want to highlight for the Chieftain in this kind of a situation is that you can have your dream situation, right? But the tank still feels a little awkward with them aiming at that weak point on top of the vehicle. And also with losing the hit points to be able to get into this forward position, it does feel very awkward as well. And importantly, that as soon as you aren't hull down, this thing just absolutely falters. Absolutely falters. So in this kind of a situation, I'm just hoping that these 3 IS-7s are going to be a little bit more aggressive. And they do the right thing. I got myself so low on hit points that they fire 2 HE shells. So thumbs up there to the 780 and the mouse. So this happened to me in so many games where the vehicle just wasn't quite fast enough to be able to... There's a little spider there. It's meant to be lucky, but I don't feel very lucky right now. Where are you? Get out of my way. So that's happened in so many games where I ended up making aggressive plays to take forward positions because this vehicle has to get hulled down to be effective inside World of Tanks, and it kind of wants to play a bit more like a medium with that turret armor. And I ended up finding that the vehicle just wasn't quite fast enough, and I lost so many hit points getting into position that I didn't really have them to be able to make those trades once I got there. So, you haven't entered the Twilight Zone. We are entering in a mirror matchup here, where we're on the other side of Serene Coast. And again, pretty much the same kind of thing here. Lots of vehicles, a few TDs, and 1 artillery to be able to mix it up a little bit in a full tier 10 matchup. And where do you think I'm going to go? Exact same position you saw in the previous battle. Let's get there and use this thing's great gun and its great turret armor. But I want to clarify that for every game where you're going to see that the Chieftain did as well as this, I had so many frustrating games for the Chieftain as well, where you don't get those dream hold down situations, where you have to end up on a map like Ensk or Himmelsdorf. And in those kind of situations where there are no hold down positions for you to be able to use, this thing feels like an absolute tragedy with its hull armor, especially when it has to deal with opponents with 120mm caliber guns that can be able to overmatch the side of the vehicle. And in those kind of situations, you're going to wish you were playing a different tank. But man, just look at how this thing snaps. So if you're someone who's got good aim, I'm not saying that I've got particularly good aim, but if you do, this vehicle could actually end up being pretty good for you. I don't think it's the kind of tank that casual players are going to do well in, because they're just not going to know the angles, they're not going to know the positions where 10 degrees of gun depression works, and they're not going to have the aim to be able to make this gun really sing. Like, at least occasionally I can when I get lucky and I get enough zombies to sit out in front of me, right? But in those situations, in those scenarios, man, this thing feels absolutely deadly. I'd say it's probably one of the most scary heavy tanks for just hold down farming play. And in a game where, you know, World of Tanks is so fast these days, being able to, whoa, disaster there that the K91 doesn't get finished off, and I lose some hit points to the DBV as well. And in a game that seems to be over in a matter of minutes these days, even at tier 10, so we can see there's 5 tanks dead on the enemy team right at the beginning of this battle, and I was sure that I was going to die with a dead driver and the mouse there. Luckily, I managed to get away with absolute murder. A little bit of a wiggle, and it looks like he misses my lower plate, and battle hits at the end shows that he hit my upper plate. So I'm just hoping, can we manage to get a shot in towards the weak point? 60 TP misses, that means we don't need any weak points now. The durability device is going to mean that we can't manage to keep his tracks off, but oh dear, we're stunned. No turbo. Surely this is it. It's got to be over. There's no way this mouse is going to mess up, but he's stunned as well, and I was so happy. They whiffed the shot. I heal my driver. I've got my mobility back in the game, and again, like you saw on the previous battle, patented QB hit points are going to come into play here, and we're going to hopefully make these last 108 hit points work. And this mouse, he's being a wonderful universal donor, or universal donor, as the case may be here, as they tried to shoot the 279E, which just allows me to have a great time in the side of the mouse. And yeah, how about 3.5 minutes and 7,000 damage? Not bad. And there's still a little bit left on the enemy team that maybe we can be able to catch in this scenario. We're going to go forwards, back out there a little bit. I just didn't want to die and also get caught by the leopard in the side there. But seeing the 60 TP fire, going to aim for that leopard, see if they're going to be able to go forwards. Look to see if I'm going to get a shot in a DBV or a Foch. That's easy money right there. The vert stab's just making this thing just absolutely wonderful with its phenomenal gun. Now, I guess there's multiple ways that you could think about this tank. A lot of people might think, oh, well, the vehicle's got good enough gun handling already. Why do you need vert stabs? But I feel like with a tank like this, which is just purely focused around the gun and keeping moving and making sure you avoid getting caught in that weak point, and the fact that when you're on a ridge line, once you've got there, you don't really need a turbo or a durability device on this vehicle, right? The durability device will give you the extra hit points, but you're never really exposing your tracks anyway. This is the build that I will use. And yeah, 9,500 combined in 4.5 minutes with 8,200 damage. When this thing gets going, it absolutely dominates a ridge. So I want to come to a conclusion about the Chieftain. Was it worth waiting 10 years for? No, I don't think it was. I honestly think this vehicle is about 5 years too late, or even 10 years too late. I think if it went into the game 5 years ago, sure, it would have been an evil tank, a great tank, all in all. However, so many tanks have been getting buffs. Type 71, M5Y. M5Y's got better alpha damage and better gun depression and better turret armor and better hull armor than this vehicle, and honestly not that much of a worse gun. It's definitely a worse gun, but it's not that much worse. So I think that this vehicle, it's going to be just so one-dimensional, aka get on a ridgeline and work, that you're going to see in this game that you can't play in certain city scenarios. You can't side scrape because of the fact that your opponents are going to overmatch you. The whole of the side of the vehicle, here we go, is just going to get munched. And it basically means that you're forced in this vehicle to go and YOLO like a medium tank flank. Or you're just going to have to sit there and wait and not be able to actually play World of Tanks. Because every single shell that hits your vehicle is going to go in. And so, I don't think that the tank is going to be as good as a can opener. Because the reality is that a can opener is like 90 to 95% as good as this vehicle on a ridgeline. I'd say it's actually arguably just as good, if not better, when you consider that the weak point on the can opener, you can't hit it. Whereas on this thing, unless you're using 10 degrees of gun depression, your weak point is just always exposed on this vehicle. And the thing is that a can opener, that thing can side scrape. That thing can land the 840 alpha damage monster bombs that this thing would have to expose itself multiple times and undoubtedly take multiple amounts of damage to be able to deal. So irrelevant of how in this tank review I've showed you a couple of magical ace tanker games that I was able to have in this vehicle with my play session where this tank looks really good on a ridgeline, I want to highlight that I actually don't think this tank is all that. I think it's going to be a dangerous vehicle for a good player on a ridgeline, and I think for the majority of players, they're going to question why their chieftain just doesn't do what other players' chieftains do. And so my final conclusion for this vehicle is it worth the price tag? Hell no. It's really not worth the price tag. You'd have to be a complete muppet to want to spend hundreds, if not $1,000 to be able to get your hands on a Chieftain Mark 6. This tank was a dream for many that is basically 5 to 10 years too late. And I think the Wargaming have really missed out on the fact that they had something that was so desired that they've put in a ridiculous, convoluted, awful, predatory system that I truly hope that players don't get sucked into. And for everyone out there who does the right thing and doesn't bother to spend hundreds, if not $1,000 to be able to get this tank, my recommendations are to you, think about shooting above the gun. That's an easy penetration on this vehicle. Hit the weak point, hit that lower plate. Even with very good HE, you will be going through that part of the vehicle. And also, let me clarify, when I say very good HE, it would have to be incredibly good HE. Like we're talking about 120 millimeters of plus of HE. But the main ticket to this tank is just go through the side armor. You can overmatch it with 120 millimeters, and if not, just be aggressive, get up in its face, shoot down on its upper hull. It's impossible for this vehicle to face hug you, and just take great satisfaction in knowing that that player spent hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of dollars to be able to get that Chieftain Mk, and you could go get yourself a can opener for free and be better. Anyway, ladies and gents, boys and girls, that was my full tank review today. Really hope you enjoyed this one. If you did, give it a thumbs up. If you hated it, give it a thumbs down. And let me know in the comments down below what you think about the Chieftain Mk. Do you think it's too little, too late by Wargaming, or do you think the vehicle looks like it's good and fun inside World of Tanks? And as always, thank you so much for watching. You've been epic, and hopefully I'll see you soon.